and also Caitlin Patterson, who is going to be running this grant cycle from the point of view of digital. So we're very excited to be offering a new digital grant. It's kind of funny in times of COVID. Everything now is digital, but we were there first, right? All right, here's just a little background in case there's anyone completely new on here or who hasn't had a chance to look at it. So this started off as really a program for rural libraries or libraries in rural areas. I feel like I'm not pronouncing that very well. Anyway, so like the first 10 years, it was all just little tiny libraries and little tiny places, kind of helping them conserve and save digitally different documents and lots of photographs. So if you haven't visited that site, it's pretty cool. And I think all the photos on this, except maybe the last slide, are things that are actually from different collections that are in the Washington Rural Heritage. So in 2018, we started expanding parameters a little bit. And we had some people that weren't completely rural. So we changed the name to digital. And we started doing some things around metadata. And then last year, pre-COVID, we decided to include special libraries as well. And we're really trying to encourage partnerships. And we didn't do a lot of specialized outreach like we did this year. So we're trying to grow this part of the program. And hopefully we'll be successful. So what's new this year? Well, the first thing that we're really excited about is that we have DocuSign, which means we no longer have to mail paper copies back and forth and wait for wet signatures and all of that. It's changed our lives enormously, and having it come during COVID has also been a blessing. Now, we have a LibGuide, which we've never used LibGuides before, but again, we're probably inordinately excited about having a LibGuide. So hopefully this will make it a lot easier for everyone. Something that we're trying right now is that you can submit a letter of interest. So if you think this might be something that would work for a project you have in mind, but you're not quite sure, you can fill out a short online letter of interest and we'll look it over and let you know if it meets our parameters or if maybe it needs to be adapted in some way or what could help it be more successful. So again, it's our first time doing this. So if you think that's helpful to you, we'd love to have you do it. This year, our awards can be up to $15,000. Last year, the limit was $8,000, so that's quite a jump for us. I'd like to emphasize that awards do not have to be $15,000. We expect you to make a logical request for funding, not just try to pad it out to get up to $15,000. A big change for us this year is that full-time staff are no longer eligible for salary reimbursement. And part of this is because you have to expend local allocated money before you can expend federal grant funding. And so in order to keep kosher with all of that, and especially with overtime and stuff like that, we've changed it. So if you are a full-time 40-hour-a-week employee, you are no longer eligible for any kind of salary reimbursement. And the last thing we're trying this year is that after you fill out your application and you turn in all the parts, we're going to make copies of those and mail them to your contracting authority. The contracting authority is the person who has the right to accept federal funding and be responsible for federal funding on behalf of your organization. So if you are an independent library, it might be the library director. If you're a municipal library, it might be the mayor in the town, or it could be maybe a fiscal officer in the town. If you're in a university, it's probably some kind of dean. Anyway, as soon as we get their confirmation of everything in your application, then it will go to our reviewers. But we're not actually requiring any kind of signature sheet at this point. Okay, now I think Caitlin is going to tell us a little bit about our objectives in presenting this.
Hi. So these grants are really designed to help meet one of Washington State Library's strategic goals, specifically the goal to connect Washingtonians to their history by employing digital initiatives and other preservation strategies to tell the stories of local communities and to celebrate our common heritage. So in line with this goal, the Word supports digital initiatives focused on archival and special collections of cultural or historical significance in various mediums and formats. The grants are open to public, tribal, special, and academic libraries, but not to other cultural or heritage organizations. However, as Mara mentioned, we encourage libraries to partner with other organizations on the project to better reach their communities. So this could include contracting some of the work. It could include digitizing materials held by a partner organization, or coordinating in some other way to produce teaching materials, online exhibits, public events, to kind of spread the impact of the grant. So if you know of another cultural heritage organization that you think would do well in a partnership with you, we encourage you to reach out. Washington State Library does not form those partnerships ourselves. It's the individual libraries and organizations that are responsible for forming those. And then the project outputs must be openly accessible to the public. Once again, this requirement can be met in a number of ways, usually through publishing content on a public-facing digital repository system, or providing guides, exhibits, and other resources on a website. So next. We have the next slide.
Sorry, maybe it doesn't work when I'm muted. No, it's just not changing. Darn, this worked perfectly in dress rehearsal, didn't it? There.
Well, it wouldn't be a presentation if something didn't go wrong, right?
Happy to take the fall.
Okay. So this is a list of what some of the possible activities that can be covered by grant funds, either singly or in combination. The first and most obvious is digital reformatting of archival and special collections. This is the most common still, probably the first that comes to mind. And these can be materials in a library's own holdings. They can be materials from a partner organization, or they can be from members of the public. And if you're digitizing materials from members of the public, they can be you can target either specific families, individuals, or organizations that you may know to be in possession of materials significant to your community. Or you can open up to the public in general through something like a community digitization day, obviously COVID restrictions allowing. Digitized materials don't need to be limited to visual media. We've had projects in the past that focused on audio resources, and we're open to other types of resources as well. And digitally reformatted materials can be submitted to the Washington State Library for inclusion in the Washington Rural Heritage website, or they can be posted on your own local system platform or repository. If you are creating materials for inclusion on the Washington Rural Heritage site, we do ask that awardees plan to digitize at least 100 items. There's some leeway for that in the cases of items that materials that require a lot of time or effort to digitize. So it's 100 items or equivalent. And of course, the Washington Rural Heritage site is full of examples of materials provided by past grant recipients. A good example of a digitization project that posted materials to a local repository would be the Abby Williams Hill collections, the journal specifically. digitized by the Collins Memorial Library at the University of Puget Sound. So next, we allow for metadata creation, remediation, cleanup, or recataloging. And this focus is generally for digitization or digital materials. So metadata cataloging and cataloging can be either to make previously digitized materials more discoverable or suitable for inclusion in a new platform. Or you can create metadata or catalog records for materials that are to be digitized. And most digitization projects will involve at least some metadata work. That's just part of what goes on with that. Western Washington University did a metadata cleanup project a few years ago when they were migrating the Beery Galen photo collection from Content DM to Islandora. And that's available on their Islandora platform. So next is the development of local standards, practices, and policies related to digitization, metadata creation, and digital preservation. And this is something that's generally done in conjunction with other activities, such as creating in-house policies and documentation, which are then followed when you're scanning materials. A good example of this is the Everett Community College. They incorporated creation of local policies and best practices into their grant-funded yearbook digitization project. And then they posted that documentation online, where it's now accessible to other community colleges throughout the state. So next, and another popular one, is the creation of Born Digital multimedia content. Usually this focuses on oral history projects, and I would point you to the Ocean Shores 50th anniversary oral history collection available on the Washington Rural Heritage website. And then lastly is the integration of primary sources and archival collections into educational settings by way of lesson plans, curricula, and open educational resources. And this is something we'd really love to see more of. We don't yet have any examples of lesson plans or online exhibits created or that were the main focus of a past Washington Digital Heritage grant. However, there are plenty of examples of these types of materials created outside of the grants to look to for inspiration. I'd point you to, at Washington State Library, we have the Primarily Washington, which offers examples both of lesson plans and exhibits geared towards teaching. DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America, also has great examples of online exhibits and lesson plans. And then we have some smaller examples available on Washington Rural Heritage, such as the Colville National Forest Heritage Collection, Story Map, and the Nesset Farm Timeline, which is part of the Mount Baker Foothills Collection. Okay, next slide. So this list wasn't exhaustive. Just because something didn't appear there doesn't necessarily mean that it's not suitable for a Washington Digital Heritage grant. We left the parameters for the digital initiatives themselves intentionally broad. In general, proposed projects need to meet that previously mentioned goal of using digital technologies to connect Washingtonians to their community history. Additionally, we're looking for projects that meet two goals, which are to develop institutional capacity to carry out and sustain digital initiatives, meaning that a library should be better situated to carry out a similar digital initiative in the future at the end of the project. And then the second goal here is to support a regional or statewide approach to digitization and the use of digital cultural heritage collections. So we really want to see the benefits of these grant funds extending beyond the library that they were awarded to. And of course, just posting materials online covers this in part, but we also like to see awardees engaging actively with their communities for instance, through social media, community partnerships, programming, outreach, like that. So if you have an idea for a project, but if you're unsure if that will qualify, submit a letter of interest or contact us. Our email is wslgrants@sos.wa.gov, and that information will also be on the last slide here. Okay. So when you're planning a digital initiative for the Washington Digital Heritage Grant funding, it's important to consider how the funds can and cannot be used. Funds may cover a number of project-related costs, but they're subject to restrictions as well. And so these points come with caveats, which Mara can explain in greater depth. So the first use is to purchase equipment or software to create, edit, optimize, or preserve digital content during the grant period. So equipment would be something like scanners, a digital camera setup to digitize materials, or for 3D objects, digital multimedia recording devices for creating oral histories, and of course, computers for processing that. So if you are planning to do a scanning project out in a community somewhere, you may need both a scanner and a laptop to go with it. For software, it can include the programs necessary for processing digital files for inclusion on your chosen platform. Things such as Adobe Creative Suite. One of the caveats here is that subscription software may need to be prorated for the grant period. We can't cover software outside the grant period. Next is to pay salaries and benefits for qualifying project staff, or to contract services, including independent contractors and third-party vendors. So once again, that's nobody already working over 40 hours a week. We can pay for staff training related to the project. So if you bought some new equipment and need training to know how to use it, that funds can cover that. I'd also point out that Washington State Library staff are available to provide training on some of the equipment and some of the procedures as well. And we provide other training grants available through the State Library, which you should check out on our virtual professional development grants page. And lastly, we can pay for costs related to outreach and promotion of the project. So this can be things like printing book leaflets or bookmarks. It can be some event costs, and it could be permanent or temporary displays of materials for your library. All of this has to be directly related to the digitization or other digital initiative project that is funded by the grant. That I'm going to hand it back to Mara.
Okay, well, that all sounded great, but now I have to tell you what is not allowable. We don't digitize newspapers, and by this I mean a whole run of newspapers. We have a separate program at Washington State Library that does that. Exceptions could be student publications, organizational newsletters, that kind of thing that have to do with your project overall. If you purchase any kind of equipment that provides internet access to the general public, then the library needs to have a current CIPA agreement, which is the Child Internet Protection Agreement, or I think I've got the A wrong, but anyway, that is a regulation that we have to abide by for our federal funding. And as Caitlin already mentioned, subscriptions or services outside of a contract period, this includes, for example, a guarantee on a piece of equipment that you bought, can only be for the period covered in the contract. I think we're going to have less problems with that this year because our contract period is a little bit longer. So we should be able to do year-long ones, I think. And if not, we can prorate them, and we'll divide it down to the day so that we can give you the maximum funding allowable. We will not pay for any archival or special collection materials like boxes or special papers. We can't pay for food, refreshments, prizes. We can't pay for anything that is promoting libraries in general. So if you want to buy pencils that promote your project and it has the name of the project printed on it, that would technically be allowable. However, if it said only the name of your library on it, or if it said libraries are great, or digital preservation is great, that would not be allowable. And then again, as we are trying to reiterate, because this has changed, we will not reimburse any work hours for regularly scheduled full-time staff. And this includes that they cannot be hired as contractors. If they work for your library, they work for your library. This brings us to the fun part, which is the actual application. So, might look a little complicated here. This is all linked through our LibGuide, which you'll see the address of shortly. It's also, if you got a letter from us last week, this was also in the letter. So number one is our online application form, and that basically contains, your basic ideas on why you want to do this, and it contains all of the information that we will need about your contracting authority, your DUNS numbers, all that kind of technical stuff. Number two is the work plan, where we ask you to go pretty much step by step what you're going to do, what dates you think it will be done in, and the person who will be responsible. And by person, I mean position, not a name, not a proper name. And number three is the budget proposal. And I probably should have put this one on top so you could see it better. But anyway, it has all of the different categories or line items that would be allowable. And there's also an example or a sample one of these online that shows it with different costs in the blank spaces so you get a better idea of exactly how to do it. And this is, of course, one of the most important parts of your application, because it's one of that our reviewers will be looking at closely. And number four is the risk assessment, and this is not for your project per se, but it is for your organization. So again, remember I said if your contracting authority would be the person in your organization. So if it's a municipality, it might be the mayor. Well, this is the information we need to know about that organization. So it might be your own library, it could be your university, and the top part of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are the parts that you have to fill out. The bottom part we do. So those are the 4 parts that we will have in a complete application. And when we have received those 4 parts, that's when we will contact your contracting authority and be able to review your application if the contracting authority says yes. We're going to do this a little bit differently this year, because instead of having all of the grants come at once, we're going to be doing them on a weekly basis. So I'll tell you about that in just a second. Because I realized I forgot to tell you about the optional letter of interest. So this is just a short form, also online, and that's where you can kind of use it as a sounding board and say, well, we think we'd like to do this, and this is a really great collection that we have, but we're not sure how to make it work. So we would love to hear about those things and see if we can coach you and help you make a more successful application. So please take advantage of that if you think you'd like to. So last day to apply, 4/16/2021. However, that is the last day. We will begin reviewing applications on 3/8/2021. And every week, we will scoop up all the applications we've got that week. We'll cut it off at 11:59 on Friday nights. On Monday morning, we'll go in and look at those. We'll email your contracting authority. We'll give them a copy of everything you've given us and ask them for their okay to go ahead. And when they say yes, that's when we'll pass it to our reviewers. The reviewers will be using a rubric to score them. If you apply and you're not awarded, but you're still within the period, we will let you know how to improve your application, and you'll have another chance to do it if you like. You don't have to, but if you like, you can try that. And so as long as we still have funding left, we will continue to accept applications through 4/16/2021. Then on here, I have copies of all of the applications. So the online application, the letter of interest, and the LibGuide. Within the LibGuide, you will find all of those forms. on the left in a left-hand column. In fact, you'll find the application and letter of interest is there as well. And then our contact information here, WSL grants at sos.wa.gov. Send us an email. Sometimes it seems like it's kind of complicated to put in an email. So if you'd like to have a conversation with either Caitlin or myself, just send us a phone number and a time, and we would be happy to call you and see what we can do. Okay? So now's the time for questions. If you have any questions you'd like to ask us. Not yet.
I've got a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Lisa Labovich from the Everett Public Library. I was going to ask you about the possibility of hosting some things on the Washington State site. For that process, are we given some kind of login to do that import ourselves, or do we present files and then the metadata?
So that's, you mean on Washington Rural Heritage, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I have a dog about to bark. I'm going to mute.
Okay. So yes, the way we generally do that is we generally have you send us the raw files, the master files themselves, generally TIFFs, and we'll upload those through Content DM. But we will also provide you access to Content DM Project Client, which means that you'll be able to, after we have posted those on the website, to pull them back down into your instance and to make any additions or changes to the metadata.
Okay.
So it's kind of a combination of the two. And
Okay.
we're happy to work with people to kind of get a workflow that works for everyone, but that's the general workflow we follow.
And I know that you mentioned audio. Are you open to video as well, or is video not desirable?
I don't know if we have any actual cases of video on the site right now. Evan might know better. We have linked to people's YouTube videos, so people have done video before, posted on YouTube, and then we can provide the metadata and a thumbnail and a link out to that video.
Yeah, we have some short clips of video, but we don't have a streaming server. So, really only short clips of, we have some digitized film clips that go up to a few minutes long, and those do okay. But yeah, we've had other videos on Internet Archive, YouTube, Vimeo, and we do have Content DM set up so that it plays inside the Content DM window rather than linking out. It's not perfect, but yeah.
It's a workaround.
It's a workaround. Yeah, I tend to steer people towards the Internet Archive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that works pretty well.
Okay, and I'll put the rest in a letter of interest because I don't want to take up more room here.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we don't have any other questions. Does anybody? No. You'll think of them as soon as we hang up, I'm sure.
One more timeline thing. So 4/16 is the last day to apply, and we're hoping to have all of the awards announced by June. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. Do you, Caitlin?
Not at the moment. Hold on a second, though. And
it's in the LibGuide, though.
But they'll run through June 30th of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be the.
They can. That doesn't mean that you have to take that long to do it. If you, you don't have to. We're going to. So if you applied, let's pretend that you apply the first week and you have a brilliant application, and all of our reviewers are so enthusiastic, and we will tell you then, yes, you're getting the award. But we're not going to send it to our contracts people to make the contract until after we've either exhausted all of our funding and awards or that last date has passed, that 4/16 date. Because we do not make our own contracts in the library, we have to send it to the Secretary of State's contracts division. or fiscal finance division. And so in order to be more popular with them and not create unnecessary work, we're going to do all of them at the same time. So you won't be able to begin work on your project. We won't be able to begin reimbursable work on your project, like buying things or anything like that, until that contract is actually in place. So I would say that would definitely be, well, definitely. I'm hearing myself say that and just asking for gremlins, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed, that would be by the end of April.
Looks like we've got another question in the chat here. So I don't think we have it restricted to K through 12 versus undergraduate in terms of lesson plans. So sorry, there's a question here in the chat whether in regards to integration of primary sources into lesson plans, we're looking for K through 12 versus undergrad. And I think you can make a case for both. I don't think we have any restrictions there. We just want to be sure that what you are creating is, fit to purpose for whatever you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, something that would make an application like that strong would be to have teachers, professors explaining why what you're doing would be something that they would be able to use. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, when you think of them, don't forget, it's wslgrants@sos.wa.gov. And we would love to hear from you. And I hope that you'll all apply. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.